I'll be brief because I know you've got a lot of important speakers, but I also have to run to a committee hearing. Listen, I have been fortunate enough to have lived the experience of access to legal aid. My wife, Kathy, was a legal aid lawyer for 10 years in Connecticut. She eventually ended up running the Children at Risk unit, the unit of Connecticut Legal Services that did work in the school systems and the juvenile court systems. I got the benefit of seeing, both the triumph, how her representation of kids and families made a difference, how the advocacy that organizations do for systemic change delivers a real punch, but also the heartbreak, the recognition that she was just scratching the surface, and that, how many kids were out there that didn't have the benefit of Kathy Holohan's representation, and their lives were fundamentally altered because of it. I tell this story all the time around my work on school discipline reform, but to me, it sort of speaks to that duality of access to legal aid. There's a young man in a big school district in Connecticut who had a habit at the beginning of his sophomore year of walking out of class. In the middle of class, he'd just walk out and he'd wander the hallways. He'd eventually get sort of confronted by a security officer or an assistant principal, and get hauled down to the principal's office, and he'd get suspended, get sent home to his grandmother with whom he lived. This happened so many times at the beginning of his sophomore year that he, by the end of October, had been out of school more days than he had been in school. He was not being delivered an education because he was being suspended so often. Well, one day he runs into an assistant principal and a security guard, actually a police officer who was patrolling the school, or a school resource officer. And he's just so frustrated at this cycle that he raises his voice. He gets in a verbal argument with the assistant principal. He's a big kid. He was African American. And he ends up getting arrested for disorderly conduct, for a verbal argument over whether or not he was going to be once again sent home for walking out of class. Luckily, he gets represented by a legal services attorney, in this case, my wife, who comes to find out that this young man is walking out of class because he can't read. He's a sophomore in high school. He can't read. He's mortified by this fact. It's finally caught up with him to the point where, as the beginning of his sophomore year, he can't follow anything that's happening in these classes. And rather than get caught and embarrassed in front of all of his friends, he's walking out of class. He gets access to legal services. He, because of that, gets his educational plan changed. He does not ultimately go forward in the criminal justice system. And that kid's life is just different. Different because he gets services and he doesn't get arrested. Instead of getting arrested, having a criminal record at age 16 and not getting the services in school. Triumphant and heartbreaking all at once. How many other kids get into that situation and don't have access? So, it's that story and so many others, that convince me that, for the 15, 20% of the US population that qualifies for these services, we have to stop making just a dent. And we have got to appropriate an amount of money necessary to allow people to have access to legal representation. And you are all going to hear about all the ways in which the pandemic has increased the need. But we've got to step up and do our part as well. We're talking about a big infrastructure bill, and I'll end here. I'm fully supportive of that infrastructure bill. But in order for people to have access to that infrastructure that we're going to build, they often need legal representation. if we're going to build a whole mess of new affordable housing in this country, which we need to, then people need access to the legal services that are required to be able to acquire housing and stay in housing. If we're going to build a whole bunch more schools in this country, as Joe Biden wants to do, then it doesn't do us very well if kids are getting suspended and expelled and arrested in schools and pushed out for common misbehaviors that used to just result in a trip to the principal's office. It's legal services attorneys that make the difference here. So I want to thank you for sort of allowing me to lead the letter that requests an increase. And I know this year we're going to be asking for a very big increase in funding. I thank my wife for taking a different job, which now allows me to lead this letter. I didn't lead this letter before or sign it because I worried it might be a conflict of interest. She's doing different work now, and so I get to play a little bit more of a public role pushing for LSC funding. I just wanted to come on and cheer on your work, your advocacy, your success in keeping this bipartisan. It is great to be able to have Republicans that we partner with in the Senate on it. It's never been more important than it is today. So thanks for convening this forum. Thanks for allowing me to be a part of it, and I look forward to working with all of you.